My name is Joseph.
I'm Ezra.
And today we're going to take you on a trip
to Alaska.
Hey folks, welcome back to the vlog. We have just finished a short hike to this epic lake in the middle of nowhere, Alaska. We're gonna take you on the journey with us over the next 6 days to explore this beautiful state. And along the way, the boys are gonna share some of their highlights of this adventure. They don't exactly know what's in store yet. In fact, I don't even know, because when we got here 6 days ago, we had 0 plans. Are y'all ready for this? Let's get started in Alaska. Are you boys excited about this trip?
Yeah.
And we just flew into Anchorage, but what do we need to get around the state for a few days?
Truck.
A truck.
A truck. What kind of truck?
Off-road adventure truck.
How about this off-road adventure truck?
On our first day, we had the opportunity to fly on an airplane.
As we arrived at the small airport, I was amazed to see how many small planes there were there. As I looked around at all the planes, I saw a small and pretty old one. That would be the one that we would be flying on today. As we hopped in and buckled up, I felt a bit scared, but as we got into the air, I felt more confident. So I sat back and took in the view.
Immediately when we got in the air, we could see everything. There were mountains everywhere and rivers. We went past some glaciers. We even got to see the tip of Mount Denali.
It was so amazing to see all the mountains and the glaciers and the rivers. As we started to head back, I was excited to get back on the ground, but also a little bit disappointed that the airplane ride was already over. It was a great way to start the trip.
So we headed back and landed the plane. I felt so privileged to have gotten to fly in a plane. Flying in an airplane was one of the most amazing things we did while we were there. On our second day, we arrived in the small town of Seward. We walked around and saw hundreds of boats. We even saw the one we would go on later to see some wildlife.
I was excited to be able to go on a super awesome tour boat. I was pretty excited to see all these different kind of animals.
As we pulled out into the ocean, I could feel the spray in my face, and I was so excited to see what we could find.
The boat pulled up to some rocks. As I looked at them more closely, I could see sea lions everywhere.
We saw mountains and glaciers, and we even saw a whale and orcas.
Next, the captain brought us to a glacier.
We pulled up to a huge glacier, and we saw a huge chunk of ice fall off into the water. As we pulled into the harbor, I was excited to get back on the ground because it had been a long tour.
As I stepped off the boat, I was happy to get off, but sad that the tour was already over.
The next day was our glacier hike. The glacier we would hike to was pretty small, but it was still big for me.
It was a pretty easy hike along a narrow path through the woods. I looked through my binoculars and I could see a few people up on the glacier hiking. Someday I would probably like to do that too.
There was a huge rushing river coming out from under it. When we got up really close to it, I could feel this cold air coming off of it. The next day was our river fishing day. We headed to a big blue river called the Kenai River. I pulled on some waders and hopped into the cold water. Once a year, the salmon are going upstream to lay their eggs. You cast your line in, you let it drift down, then you jerk it and fling it back up. After about 15 times, I caught a fish. It was my first salmon, and I was so excited.
I was super excited because it would be my first time catching salmon. As I got in the water, it felt like I was going to get swept away because it was so strong. After about 15 times casting, I got one. I was so excited that I caught my first fish in Alaska. As I held it in my arms, it just about fell out and fell back into the water. This is one of the best things I did in Alaska. The next day would be our ocean fishing. This would be my first time out in the ocean fishing. I was super stoked about doing this and super excited how to learn and how to catch one. The fishing boat that we went on was super nice.
We pulled out of the harbor and started heading to a fishing spot.
A special thanks to Matt from the YouTube channel Salty Alaska for taking us out on his boat. I'll leave a link for his channel in the description below.
After a while, we stopped and found a perfect spot. We dropped our lines all the way to the bottom. We were in about 100 feet of water. After about 20 minutes, I felt something on my line. I started reeling it up, and I knew I had a fish on. The fish I caught was only 15 pounds, which sounds pretty heavy, but halibut can get up to about 300 pounds. But I was still super excited because it was my first fish on the ocean.
The boat pulled to a stop. We got some fishing poles and started to fish. We would be fishing for halibut, cod, and other kind of fish. After about 10 minutes, I hooked one. It was a really small fish compared to how big they can get, but I was super excited to catch my first fish on the ocean.
After that, then we headed back into the harbor, and we were super excited that we had caught some fish out on the ocean. As we pulled into the harbor and hopped off the boat, I was so excited. It was an amazing experience that I'll never forget. Our last day, we hiked to a lake. The hike was very tiresome, but the view was so worth it. When we got to the top, you could see everything. The lake was crystal clear, and it was an amazing time.
This was our last day in Alaska. I was pretty sad, but I was super happy for the hike ahead of us. But when we got to the top, it was definitely worth it. When we got up there, the view was so amazing. Probably one of the best views on the whole trip. The lake was so clear, I could see right to the bottom. As I hiked down, I was so glad that I got to come on this trip. I was so sad to already be leaving Alaska, but I was happy to go home and see my family.
As I sat up there, I saw how beautiful God's creation is. It was our last day, so we were pretty sad that we were going home. The hike down was steep, but when we got to the bottom, I knew that was a great way to end our trip.
All in all, this trip to Alaska with my boys was truly epic and amazing. The irony is that I probably wouldn't have chosen to send Forrest to Africa by himself, and I also wouldn't have chosen to take my boys to Alaska. It always seemed too far away and too hard to get to, but once we were there, we realized what the draw of Alaska truly is. But mostly what I'd like to emphasize in this video is that whether you fly around the world or go across the street, you can invest in the lives of your children. You can take them on little adventures in the backyard, or you can take them around the world and introduce them to a wider context of the work that God is doing. And while our trip in Alaska wasn't technically a missions trip, I see it as an investment in my boys and in their future as they gain a perspective of what the love of a father can look like for them, and ultimately what the love of God looks like for them as well. So my encouragement to you is to take your children out on an adventure. With that, until next time, we love you guys, God bless you, and we'll see you in the next adventure.